I'm here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Alexander, let's do a breakdown of the Mueller testimony. And I'd like to say that we should call this the Mueller testimony into the Weissmann report. Because I think that was one of the big reveals of his testimony, was that Mueller was just pretty much a figurehead in this whole thing. He was a front man, and the people that were really running the show were Weissmann and his team of Democrats, partisan Democrats, who really had it out for Trump. And well, there was a lot said during the testimony. Democrats on the left were softballing him, and they were trying to get that statement from Mueller that, you know, he didn't exonerate Trump. I think that was the big statement they were looking at. And there was a time during the testimony where he said something like that to Ted Lieu, and then he came back and he retracted that, which I thought was an interesting moment. And then, of course, you had the Republicans on the right who were I would say they did a good job in hitting at Mueller, but I think they could have done an even better job digging into a lot of the questions that me and you have, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers have. So first, Alexander, give us your overall, your big impression take on the testimony, and then just, dig into some of the topics that you would like to discuss as to what was said during the entire Mueller testimony into the Weissmann report.
The Weissmann report. Well, first of all, can I say that in my opinion, what we saw with that testimony is the death rattle of the Russiagate conspiracy hoax. I think that anybody watching that disastrous testimony is going to be incredibly unconvinced now that that hoax has any reality behind it. I speak now, of course, about people who retain some degree of logical and reasoning ability, because you get fanatics who are simply not open to any argument or reason. Now, can we first of all talk about Mueller? Mueller is somebody who I had been told, and I think the whole of the United States and the world had been told, was this super investigator, this genius prosecutor, this pillar of integrity, this genius of criminal investigation. The Eliot Ness, if you like, of the contemporary world. And what does he come up with? I mean, it was an absolute and complete shambles. And time and again, it was absolutely clear to me and to you, and I think to many people, that he didn't know his own report. I mean, he only knew about it in the sketchiest way. So he didn't know he didn't know that his report had said. Yes. Yeah, well, he didn't know that his report had said collusion and conspiracy are one and the same thing. He didn't know about fusion GPS. He seemed incredibly ignorant about Joseph Mifsud. He got the whole business about the Justice Department guidelines and whether or not, they had actually prevented him from coming to a finding of obstruction. He said one thing at one point, and then he contradicted himself about that at another. He was pressed about the point about exoneration, and he was asked straightforwardly, when does a prosecutor ever exonerate? And where do the guidelines say that, a prosecutor says, that you can't exonerate someone? And he was completely thrown, and he seemed desperately unprepared. And of course, there were the long pauses, there were the sort of vague looks, there was the shuffling around in the report, there were the requests to have questions repeated, there were requests for page numbers and paragraphs. I mean, now, I've read stories about how old Mueller is. He's 74. That's not so old nowadays.
And Trump is 73, I think.
Well, exactly. He's just a year older than Donald Trump. Well, Trump is a very vigorous 73-year-old. But I don't think that Mueller is really senile. My own view about this, and I have 3 points to make. Firstly, I think it's absolutely clear that you're completely right. He didn't write his report. He didn't write most of the letters that were sent to Barr. That came out during the testimony. And, of course, he didn't write the statement that he gave at that famous press conference that he did a few weeks ago, which we unpacked at that time. And I think, it's clear, by the way, now that that press conference was to conceal that statement at the press conference that if he came before Congress, he would only repeat what was in the report, was intended to prevent him coming before Congress, to conceal the fact that he didn't write the report. He clearly didn't write the report. And who wrote the report? Well, you had the 18 angry Democrats on his team. The senior amongst them was Andrew Weissmann. I've read that report. I've actually read it twice now. I've read it through twice. I said at the time that it was a giant fishing expedition that didn't catch any fish. That's what I said in the day it came out, when we did a 1 hour video, a live video about it. And I stand by that opinion. What I also said during that 1 hour video that we did was that it was an incredibly aggressive prosecutorial report, far from being impartial. It constantly acted on the basis that the presumption of innocence was reversed. It engaged in what was essentially a presumption of guilt at all times, so that even the most innocuous meetings between Trump people or people remotely connected to the Trump campaign and to people remotely connected sometimes to Russia were always assumed to be something, bad and sinister, but in the end, they could find no evidence. And you had this bizarre volume 2 with this very peculiar and very outlandish and wrong academic discussion about obstruction. That looked to me as if it was written by Weissmann. And I have to say, some of the tactics that we saw during the Mueller investigation, the people being arrested in the most outrageous circumstances, put through the grinder. I mean, I've spoken about the third degree in several of our programs together, and forced into confessing to process crimes and attempts to make them flip, to get them to say things to implicate other people, which never completely came together, but which nonetheless were unbelievably aggressive tactics. That also seems to me to be the hallmark of Andrew Weissmann, who has a history of doing this sort of thing. So, yes, I think Weissmann has written the report, as he's written all the other documents. I think he was the unofficial driver and leader of this investigation. I think he ran this investigation with the objective of pinning something on Donald Trump. He couldn't succeed on the collusion because the evidence just wasn't there. He made a really desperate attempt with the Donald Trump Jr. Veselnitskaya meeting in Trump Tower, where he came up with this outlandish theory that meeting was somehow a breach of campaign finance laws. Even he couldn't make that one stick. So he came up instead with this long academic discussion about obstruction, and he used that as an excuse to keep the investigation going for at least a year longer than it needed to go. So it has Andrew Weissmann's fingerprints all over it. Andrew Weissmann, in the end, wasn't able to come up with anything. Robert Mueller looks an empty suit and a fool. He has destroyed, I think, forever his reputation in America. The Democrats are furious with him. The Republicans are angry with him. That is the end of Robert Mueller. And as I said, I see this as the death rattle of Russiagate. I think from now on, everything that we will see will be the reverse of Russiagate. It will be the investigation of those people who tried to sell us this ridiculous story, which you and I never believed.
Yeah, I think we have 3 investigations coming out. One Duran, Barr, and another one on, I believe, the Clinton Foundation, if I'm not mistaken, as well.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, they're going to start to hit back.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
The DOJ and the Trump team, they're going to hit back, and they should.
Yes. Well, I mean, one of the points about the prolonging of this investigation beyond all reason, because to be very clear, it should never have been set up at all. I mean, I think that's now fairly well established that already by the early spring of 2017, the FBI and the DOJ knew that there was, in fact, that there was no collusion between Trump and the Russians. And Comey was telling Trump, you're not under investigation, and was refusing to say this in public. Already very bad, in my opinion. And there was apparently, according to John Solomon on the Hill, they'd already done a massive wire diagram going through all the allegations in the Trump dossier and had established that that dossier was simply unreliable and had no basis and was a work of fiction. And that was already the spring of 2017. But let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's assume that there was something to investigate when the Mueller investigation was created. By the autumn of 2017, I think it's now conclusive. They'd established that there was no collusion. They didn't report the fact. They went on going through the motions of an investigation that was looking increasingly not at collusion, but at obstruction. Why did they do that? In order to conceal the things that had really gone on, which is the massive misconduct within the Justice Department and the FBI and the CIA. And now what's happened is that with Attorney General Barr, William Barr, coming in, forcing this investigation to be closed down, we're now seeing the real investigations with Duran, with Horowitz, with this other Clinton Foundation investigation, which does exist, but which I know very little about. They're all starting to take off, and I predict that the next 2 years are going to be, the next year, right up to the November 2020 election, is going to be taken up with that. I predict that we will start to see things coming together around September, when Inspector General Horowitz is due to publish his report. It was postponed because so many more people now have had the courage to come together, to come forward from the Justice Department and the FBI and give evidence about the malpractice and misconduct that was going on. And I predict that that will be a far more important report than the one we've seen from Mueller. And it will start the ball rolling, and it could very well trigger indictments. So we will see where we go.
All right. So I'm sure all our viewers have seen all the sound bites and all the video clips as to, how they grilled Mueller and all the gaffes, there were a lot. I think it was 198 times that he said it's not in my purview, or I can't answer that, all this ridiculous stuff. I agree with you. I think it was one part him just not knowing his report because he didn't write it, another part him just acting out as this, feeble, poor old man, because I think that's the card he's going to play when Horowitz and Dunham and Barr and all these guys go after the investigators who were doing this stuff, who tried this soft coup against Trump. So I think Mueller's going to fall back on this, I'm just a poor, old guy. Don't go after me. But anyway, Alexander, so I'm sure all our viewers by now have seen everything. I want to get to the genesis of how this all started, because we forget about how this all, rolled up into this Mueller investigation, the special counsel. And Jim Jordan touched a little bit on it, but I thought the Republicans could have really dug in a lot harder into why was this investigation started to begin with. This was not a criminal investigation at all. So, how did it become this investigation of collusion and obstruction and all this stuff? Jim Jordan mentioned Mifsud, so I'd like you to talk a little bit about Mifsud. We've done videos on Papadopoulos when he was speaking with Mark Stein, and he also mentioned a lot about how this Mifsud and this Stefan Halper character got in touch with him. And that's one part of the equation as to how this whole Trump-Russia election meddling narrative got formulated. But there was another part, and I think you touched upon it, previously as you were speaking about the Mueller testimony. And that part has to deal with the Obama DOJ, the Hillary Clinton campaign, the 18 intelligence agencies narrative, and all that stuff that was being floated around in 2015, 2016. Now, I'm going to say a couple of things, and then I want you to dig deeper into it. my first thing that I think about when I'm thinking Weissmann is this. There was a book called Shattered, and I'm sure you know all our viewers have heard about it, which kind of chronicles, the start of this Trump-Russia collusion, election meddling thing. And there's a part in that book where it says, during the election night at Hillary Clinton's headquarters, when she found out that she lost, that she was going to lose, Clinton, Robbie Mook, and John Podesta, they concocted this whole Russia election meddling idea. But at that event, at those headquarters, was also Andrew Weissmann, and that's confirmed. So I think that Weissmann was part of this group, or was informed immediately afterwards that we're going to put this plan into motion. Robbie Mook and Podesta, they cooked it up with Clinton, and they actually, I think they pulled Weissmann into the room. This is how I'm visualizing this. They probably pulled him into the room. They said, "Okay, Andrew, this is how we're going to play this, and you're going to be the person that's going to investigate this." And I think that's, I'm simplifying it, but I think something like that probably happened because he was there. I also want to get to an article that you wrote, Alexander. You wrote this article, let me find the date, on October 10th, 2016. The title of this article was U.S. Intelligence Meddles in U.S. Presidential Election. Backs Hillary Clinton, tries to stop Donald Trump. Do you remember that article, Alexander?
I remember it very well.
Okay, great.
It was the time when I was really beginning to get really concerned about what was happening. And anyway, carry on.
Okay,
Alex.
Great. Because in this article, you also kind of outline the genesis of what was going to become literally an attack on U.S. democracy. And you even stated that Hillary Clinton, by consistently and constantly repeating this U.S. intelligence community is confident that the Russian government, hacked the emails, by consistently saying this, you said that Hillary Clinton is putting a bomb, and this is a quote, is putting a bomb under U.S. democracy. You said this was probably the worst thing that Hillary Clinton could have done. And in that article, I'm going to quote you, you said, as you were referring to this narrative of U.S. intelligence agencies confident, they use that word confident, that Russia, hacked the servers and got the DNC leaks, and they passed it on. As we know now, it goes to Guccifer 2, to WikiLeaks, to Putin, this whole, narrative that's been concocted. You say that, and this is quote, "It is merely confident, not sure. That is the Russians who are behind the hacking. And it is clear from the statement that it arrived at this conclusion purely through inference, because the hacks supposedly were consistent with the methods and motivations of Russian-directed efforts." You started to question that in 2016 because you saw that this is not how Russian intelligence acts. And the word confident was a misdirection. And now we know that it wasn't 17 intelligence agencies. It was most likely 3-4 interns who didn't even put their signature to that document. But even today, this narrative is being talked about in the mainstream media. So I've given you a lot of points to launch from, Alexander, from Mifsud to Halper to Hillary Clinton on the campaign trail to the scenario, outlined in the book Shattered, to this narrative of 17 intelligence agencies, because this is how this all gained momentum and turned into this Mueller investigation.
Right. That's actually very helpful that you brought all these pieces together, because in fact you can follow a clear timeline. And what I think is very interesting about this whole Russiagate story is that in terms of its timing, it clearly has its origins much earlier than people realize. Something seems to have been going on as early as the autumn of 2015. You have George Papadopoulos, who's this junior Trump aide. He's brought to London. He's himself puzzled why. He's being introduced to all these extraordinarily important people at roughly that sort of time. He's meeting Stefan Halper, which is very strange. And Stefan Halper, as we know, turns out to be a provocateur. But most importantly, he is introduced to Joseph Mifsud. And you're quite right to mention the fact that Mifsud was brought up repeatedly in Mueller's testimony. And it was striking how Mueller continuously avoided discussing Mifsud. Because Mifsud is supposed to be the key to Russiagate. The official story is that Papadopoulos has this meeting with Mifsud. Mifsud is a Russian intelligence asset. That's practically what they're saying. They meet in this very expensive hotel in London near Liverpool Street Station in March 2016. Mifsud tells Papadopoulos that the Russians have all these emails of Hillary Clinton, and Papadopoulos allegedly blurts out this story to in front of Alexander Downer, the American High Commissioner, in June of 2016. It's then passed on to the FBI.
The Australian High Commissioner. I think you said
American.
The
Australian High Commissioner. That's right. The Australians then pass on this information to the US, which leads the FBI on the 31st of July. When I say the FBI, Peter Strzok, the lead investigative agent, to initiate the counterintelligence investigation, Operation Crossfire Hurricane, which is the Russiagate investigation, which eventually Mueller took over. That's the official narrative. But what we now know, and we know it from Papadopoulos, but we also are starting to get all kinds of other information that's starting to come together. What we now know is that the pieces don't really add up. That Mifsud, it turns out, did not have very great links with Russian intelligence, or indeed any definable links with Russia at all. When Mueller was asked questions about this, about Mifsud's real intelligence connections, he avoids discussing it. And it seems that Mifsud is increasingly looking like a provocateur. Now, Papadopoulos has also said that he was being recorded, that Halper was recording his conversations with him, and the Downer was recording his conversations with him, with their mobile phones. And it turns out that there are, in fact, transcripts of these conversations between Papadopoulos and these two people, and they exonerate Papadopoulos. But already, so it looks as if some kind of a setup was already being created around around the early part of 2016, late 2015, long before Russiagate formally begins, the Russiagate investigation formally begins, and long before the DNC emails are published by WikiLeaks on the 22nd of July of 2016. So already we're starting to see all kinds of strange things starting to happen there. But then, of course, we get other things beginning to happen, because then starting in October 2016, we learn that there are these surveillance operations of Carter Page, all these FISA warrants. But what we've more recently learned is that the FISA warrants, in fact, are much, much more extensive than we've previously been told. So it seems definite, for example, that Manafort was subjected to FISA warrants long before all of this started. And coming back to this extraordinary statement, which I'm glad you've brought it up, because, of course, it's now been almost forgotten, which was published in October 2016, which I discussed then. I invite people to read this article, which I think you're going to provide a link to, because the point about that statement, the thing that stood out to me instantly when I read it, was the incredibly manipulative language that was being used in that statement. It was continuously leading people who read it and who are not trained in reading things as I am trained to do. It was intended to make it seem that things were proved when they were not proved. So you have a system of inference to prove these sorts of DNC hacking. It made it look as if this had been definitely established when it clearly hadn't been. And it was all done in a way that was clearly intended at that time to make it appear that Donald Trump was being helped by the Russians. So that narrative, which evolved into the collusion narrative, was already being given official sanction by the US intelligence community in October 2016, well before the actual election. And what other things were going on at that time? Well, we know that from June 2016, another London-based British intelligence operator, Christopher Steele, was also at work churning out his memos, his dossier. We know that this dossier was widely disseminated across the US intelligence community. We also know that that same dossier was being circulated by the Hillary Clinton campaign, who had paid for it, to the media. This at the same time that that very manipulative statement that the intelligence agencies were putting out was published. So already you see, well before the election, clear evidence that people like Papadopoulos was the subject of provocations by people who look increasingly like they had intelligence backgrounds. Halper, Mifsud, perhaps others, this mysterious Azra Turk woman, I've probably not got her name exactly
Downer,
right.
I mean, an Australian
Downer,
diplomat?
Downer, Australian diplomat. So we see all of that going on. We see Christopher Steele churning out his dossier. We have this very mysterious meeting between Veselnitskaya and Donald Trump Jr. in June 2016 at Trump Tower, which it subsequently has turned out that she was working with Glenn Simpson and Fusion GPS, the same people who were, of course, working with Christopher Steele to produce the Trump dossier. Coincidence? Possibly, but it's interesting. I mean, the timing is very, very interesting. And then, as I said, whilst all of this is going on, we have in October 2016 this very mysterious, this very extraordinary statement, which was clear interference in the US presidential election. And how do we know it was interference in the US presidential election? Quite apart from its manipulative language, quite apart from the fact that all these other bad things were going on. Why do we know, over and above its manipulative language, that that statement was made in bad faith? We know because one important person refused to sign it, who was James Comey, the director of the FBI, who said at the time, this violates the Hatch Act. The Hatch Act is the act which says that the intelligence agencies cannot interfere in US elections. So even Comey could see that this was interference, and for that reason he refused to sign it, even though in other respects he was enthusiastically engaging in all the election interference that we've been talking about. So we have a very ugly picture. Now, it goes back, as I said, it seems to me it goes back to 2015. On the 31st of July, 2016, or thereabouts, because there are now theories that, in fact, that date of the 31st of July, 2016 is a fiction, and that it was actually earlier. But sometime in June, July 2016, the FBI starts a formal investigation. Peter Strzok, as I said, is at the center of it. And then, mysteriously, after the election, when Robert Mueller is appointed, this counter-espionage investigation morphs into a criminal investigation. And we've never really been told how that came about. And that is important because, as Andrew McCarthy on National Review, and he's a lawyer, a great lawyer, and a former federal prosecutor, has repeatedly pointed out, you don't appoint prosecutors, special counsel to head counter-espionage investigations. So at some point, in some way, that investigation was twisted. And what happened in the sequel to that investigation, the setting up of that investigation with Robert Mueller as its nominal head, he appoints 18 angry Democrats. Lead amongst them is Andrew Weissmann, who is at that event on election night that you have identified, you've spoken about. He is a donor to the Hillary Clinton campaign. That fact alone should have disqualified him from being involved in an investigation like this. He has a clear conflict of interest, yet he's appointed to be a lead investigator in it. And we now have all the indications are that he wasn't, in fact, just an investigator and a prosecutor, but that he was actually the person who was, in fact, running it and who wrote the report and who wrote all the other documents. So it seems to me that what we have here, if we put all these different pieces together, is at least the appearance of the intelligence community, or at least parts of the intelligence community, the CIA definitely, probably obviously sections of the FBI also, the Justice Department, the Democratic Party, the Hillary Clinton campaign, all of these people coming together to create this story of Donald Trump's links to Russia, to create the story of Russia helping Donald Trump to win the election. That was during the election. And then on election night, deciding that they were going to expand the story even more to imply that, in fact, Donald Trump had not been really or properly elected, but that, in fact, he only won that election because of Russia, with all the preparatory work being done before the election to create that impression. So that's how it looks to me. And I would remind you of something else, which also I think lends credence to this story, which is, of course, we had all those leaks during the transition period, which seemed to implicate Donald Trump and his campaign in involvement with the Russians. We had the publication by BuzzFeed of the Steele dossier after a meeting between Donald Trump and the intelligence agencies. And of course, we had Susan Rice and I can't remember her name, Samantha
Power, yeah.
Going around unmasking members of the Trump campaign in what seems to me a clear abuse of executive power in order to make this narrative gain traction. So all of the pieces are there. It seems to me that there's a clear jigsaw to be put together when you put these pieces together. I don't think we are seeing more than there is. I think by now there are just too many coincidences and too many examples of obvious misconduct. I think what needs to happen, and what I suspect is happening, is that we see Barr, Horowitz, Duran, and all of these other people determined to get to the grip of this thing, at the bottom of this thing, find out how it came about that agencies of the US government, the intelligence agencies especially, but also the federal law enforcement agencies such as the Justice Department, were effectively enlisted into the job, first of making Hillary Clinton president of the United States, and when that failed, of ensuring that Donald Trump, the person who defeated her in an election, defeated her honestly and fairly in an election was delegitimized and was removed from office, because that's what happened.
It's quite outstanding. It's almost hard to believe that, or maybe the truth does win, that Trump got out of this unscathed. I mean, he is still president. I mean, this is the full weight of the U.S. intelligence agencies, the deep state, the Obama administration and Obama officials like Rice and Power, Obama himself. I'm sure Obama knew everything that was going on. The entire Clinton machine. And you left out, Alexander, the mainstream media.
Oh, of course.
That was also on their side. So you mentioned all this collusion, and this is what was taking place, all this collusion.
Yes.
Number one, to prevent Trump from even having a chance to compete with Clinton during the election. And when that failed, to delegitimize Trump, you had all these forces working together for 2 to 3 years to destroy Trump. And Trump got out of it. And that says that, the truth really did prevail in this case. Or maybe I'm looking at it very naively, but my God, the amount of weight that was put behind trying to secure Clinton the presidency and then to destroy Trump is incredible when you think about it. Absolutely incredible. And I've got this quote where you mentioned the words that they were using, going back to the intelligence community document where they said that Russia, they got the hacked documents and they were hacking into the DNC and the DC leaks and all that stuff. You bolded the words where the U.S. intelligence community is confident, they use that word, Guccifer 2.0 online persona are consistent with methods and motivations. You bold that word. You say techniques across Europe and Eurasia, for example, to influence public opinion. Then they use the word we believed based on the scope and sensitivity. You're exactly right. They're using all these words to screw with our heads, to screw with everyone's head.
Exactly.
And this is the full weight of the intelligence community. And then you couple that with Obama and you couple that with the mainstream media and all these other forces. And here we are today. And Trump came out on top.
Indeed. So can I just say something about that statement? Not only is it extremely manipulative and very dishonest, it's extremely clever. I mean, whoever wrote it was a very clever person. And that does make one extremely worried about, what kind of intellect, corrupted intellect, is drawn to do something like that. That was one of the things that I really felt about this. But coming back to Donald Trump and how he survived, I think there are 3 reasons for this. Firstly, Donald Trump himself. And one of the most extraordinary things about Russiagate is that Donald Trump has come out completely clean. I mean, it's not just the Russian collusion allegations they've been looking into. You can be sure they've been looking into his business transactions, his taxes.
That was revealed, actually.
Exactly.
During the testimony.
Exactly.
Mueller found nothing.
Nothing, exactly. I mean, inconceivable they weren't also looking into his sex life. And, it's extraordinary that, he must be one of the most financially honest people in America is all I could say, because it's quite clear that they weren't able in the end to lay a glove on him. And that is actually very remarkable, given the sort of things that people say about Donald Trump. I mean, I hear about how he's supposed to be breaching the emoluments clause. Not true, by the way. That's a complete misunderstanding of the emoluments clause. That's the clause which says that you're not allowed to take money from foreign governments. He's not breaching the emoluments clause. The fact that he's hotels in foreign countries and gets money from them, that's legitimate business. It is not bribes. The emolument clause is about bribes. He has obviously not taken bribes. He has obviously not evaded taxes. He has obviously not engaged in massive financial corruption. And that's a very remarkable thing. And it's something people need to hold on to, because if he had done any of those things, we would know about them. So Donald Trump is one reason. The second reason is that there are clearly people within the US justice system who still take their job seriously. I mean, we've talked about William Barr. We've talked about that there are other people also. I mean, it came very close, but in the end, the system self-corrected. And I think one of the unsung heroes of this thing is Horowitz, the Inspector General of the FBI, who released a first report. And remember, he's a holdover from before, Trump moved in. He's clearly a man of, to all appearances, of great personal integrity. And it's clear that there were other people who were also of integrity also. There's also alternative media, which played a big role in highlighting the absurdity of these things. We should not underestimate the role of people like us, and that is why there are all these attempts to suppress us, because that's what we've been doing. We've not been creating a false narrative. We have been telling the truth and undermining the false narrative that the powers that we've been talking about tried to inflict on everyone. And last but not least, and I'm going to say this, and I'm not being sentimental here or romantic, the good sense of a critical mass of the American people. They were not prepared to vote for Hillary Clinton because they clearly sensed that there was something fundamentally wrong with her. And they were not really ultimately moved by Russiagate at all. Donald Trump's support held up right through it. People were being relentlessly told that he is the corrupt Siberian candidate run by Putin, and his base never believed it. And when we talk about his base, we must remember we're talking about tens upon tens of millions of Americans who showed far better sense and understanding of what was really going on than all those clever, sophisticated people in Washington and New York and San Francisco and Los Angeles who fell hook, line, and sinker for this story. So, I know that sounds a little romantic.
Oh, it's spot on.
But I think it's spot on. And I think that I think it's important that be said. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's great that, we broke it down now, and hopefully this will be the end of it. I don't think it will. I think the Democrats are going to double and triple and quadruple down on this because they don't have anything else. But there is. Can
I just say something about this? There's a brilliant article by Byron York on the Washington Examiner about all of this, about how it seems there are still people within the Democratic Party, including Nadler. I mean, he chaired this Mueller fiasco, and he's still talking about the need for impeachment. Yeah. And Byron York points out what a disastrous error that would be now. But, if people want to destroy themselves, whom the gods destroy, they first make mad. And clearly that's what's happening with people like Nadler and with the other prominent Democrats.
Nadler, Ted Lieu, Swalwell, Eric Swalwell, even Pelosi doesn't want to put an end to this, which they really should for the good of the party and the good of the upcoming elections in the next year.
Absolutely.
They should just let it go.
They should.
But they're not.
They can't let it go because they're, as I think you said on an earlier program that we did, they become addicted to this thing. I mean, they can't shake it because they're addicted to it. I mean, so they get up every morning and they're trying to find this mysterious connection which will prove collusion between Trump and the Russians, or will prove obstruction, even though it isn't there. None of these things are there. I mean, the obstruction thing, which I've discussed, by the way, at great length in a preface to one of the two Russiagate books, which we've just publishing, which we'll talk about a bit more in a moment. That obstruction argument is absolutely as ridiculous as the claim of collusion between Trump and the Russians. And one of the weird things about Mueller's testimony is he says, well, we're not exonerating Trump of this allegation, But we're not saying, and he actually said this, we're not saying he's culpable either. We came to no view. He came to no view because there is nothing there.
Yeah, guilty until proven innocent.
Well, which is absurd, and that was what was pointed out to him. And of course, he just disintegrated under that line of questions.
Yeah, I would have loved the Republicans to have dug a little bit deeper into how all of this started. There was a lot that they missed, but then again, it's such a complicated and very long type of process that played out over the last 3 years as to how we got to this point, that I can see when you only have 5 minutes, you try to zero in on certain topics and on certain focal points. But there was a lot there that they could have dug into.
Of course there was. And I tell you what, I think the format of this thing is incredibly difficult. What it really needed, actually, was one person, a trained prosecutor, Trey Gowdy, who of course is no longer, because he's no longer in Congress, but he would have been ideal for this. Somebody like that to just cross-examine Mueller. He
would have torn Mueller apart.
And it would have obliterated him. I mean, if it had happened like that, then as I said, we wouldn't be talking about a debacle and a fiasco, which is what we are talking about. It would have been far, far worse even than what it was. And we might have actually got closer to the truth on certain things, like, on Mifsud, on the role of Fusion GPS, because it's inconceivable that Mueller doesn't really know about these things. He isn't a doddery old man. You're quite right. He's hiding. He knows all these investigations are going on. He knows Horowitz is working away. He knows Durham is working away. He's heard about all of these whistleblowers coming forward, and that's why he looks so nervous and so scared and was hiding behind his report. And he's already, this is my opinion, creating just as you said, he's creating his alibi. I was this doddery old chap. I wasn't really in charge.
Playing it stupid.
Yeah, I'm playing it stupid.
Yeah, that's exactly
that's exactly what he was doing.
That's exactly how he's going to play it stupid. I wouldn't be shocked at all if they throw Weissmann under the bus. Both the Hillary Clinton campaign and Mueller and all these people. Weissmann already has a god-awful reputation.
Yes.
I mean, from what I understand, he is the worst of the worst when it comes to lawyers as far as reputation goes.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he takes the fall for all of this stuff. And I think there are going to be people that are going to take the fall. Comey, Clapper, Brennan. We'll see what Barr and Dunham and all these people dig up. But I think you closed it out perfectly, Alexander. For all the social media that we have, for all the technology, for the way Obama ran the White House for 8 years and the way Obama campaigned, Trump is a different type of politician in that he goes to the people.
Yes.
And where you had someone like Obama, who was this elitist type of character that would never set foot in a stadium in the middle of Oklahoma or somewhere like that. Obama was, playing basketball with Clooney and, shooting Hollywood films when he was president and, inviting Angelina Jolie to the White House. That was Obama. But Trump, he always goes to the people. And I think you said it perfectly. It was, at the end of the day, it was the American people that provided they were the front line in preventing the deep state from destroying the U.S. presidency and destroying the person they voted for.
Exactly, and that is something that it should fill one with hope. I'm just going to say something about Obama, by the way, because the difference between Obama and Trump. I mean, I know people always say that we defend Trump, but Trump speaks and tweets like an actual person. I think that's a huge aspect of his appeal. He talks to people. I used to have to read Obama's speeches, and it was the same convoluted, manipulative language that you saw in that intelligence community statement that came out in October 2016. May I make it very clear here? I'm not suggesting that it was Obama who wrote that statement. I'm sure it wasn't. But all I am saying is it's that kind of mentality. It's enormously contorted, twisted words, which never mean quite what they seem to mean. With Donald Trump, what you see is what you get, and that is very different.
Yeah, I agree with that statement. Hopefully, Alexander, this will be the last show that we do on Russiagate. I don't think it will be.
Oh no.
I doubt it.
I think we have many more programs.
Yeah, we have a lot more comedy and clown show ahead.
Exactly. I mean, the Democrats, as you rightly say, won't let go. And of course, Horowitz and Duran and Barr and the rest are now, I think, closing in. But can I just also say, I think in terms of its credibility, I come back to what I said at the beginning. I think Mueller's testimony is the death rattle of the Russiagate hoax. I think, apart from a few fanatics like Nadler, I mean, even Adam Schiff, I saw what he was saying. Even Adam Schiff doesn't truly believe in it anymore. I mean, not after what happened with Mueller. Even Adam Schiff has now said that impeachment isn't going to happen. And that's the truth of it.
All right. That was a great breakdown of the Weissmann report. Okay. Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Guys, if you like this video, click on the subscribe button down below. Click on the notifications bell. And also, you can get a copy of this video in audio format. Follow us on iTunes and Soundcloud. Please donate to us on PayPal, Patreon, and Subscribestar. Alexander, we've got 50 minutes, but I want you to talk very, very quickly. Number one, about the Duran shop and the great merchandise we have. And number two, which is even more important than the Duran shop at this moment, are the 2 ebooks that we launched, that we put on the Duran shop. You can find them on the Duran shop. The link is in the description box down below, for which you wrote a foreword to each ebook. And if you buy both ebooks together, you get a very special price.
Well, there you go. So we've spent, as Alex says, a long time discussing Russiagate because it looks very complicated. When people are trying to confuse you, they always make it look very complicated. And it takes a long time to unpack the falsehoods and the nonsense that they spin. Now, if you wanted all the sort of things we were talking about today in this video explained clearly in a written form that you can understand and follow very simply, it's all in those prefaces. One preface deals with Barr and the critical role Barr has played in bringing all this nonsense to a stop. And in that book, we discuss what Mueller has been doing and what we thought Mueller was doing. We should say Weissmann, perhaps. What Weissmann were up to. And the way in which that investigation got completely out of control, and how Barr saved the Republic, because he did, by bringing it back under control. And in the other book, we discuss the role of what we call the deep state, and which I think accurately is called the deep state, and we explain the genesis of the whole Russiagate conspiracy, hoax, theory, call it what you will. I think dirty tricks is what it really was, an operation of astonishing corruption, and how its objective was to make Hillary Clinton president of the United States, and how it ended up planting that bomb under the US Constitution and the American Republic that I spoke about in that article that came out in October 2016, just before the US election. So those 2 books, I would recommend them. They will enlighten you. You will understand Russiagate much better.
And of course, you've got very quickly a really nice, brand new blue Duran polo with the white.
Absolutely, absolutely. It looks amazing, if I may say. I went to a meeting with my lawyers in Athens wearing it and looked incredibly smart. And because why shouldn't I? It's 100% cotton. It's blue. It's, by the way, for those of you who don't know, it's the color of the Greek flag. It's blue and white. But that's not the only reason to buy it, because, as I said, blue and white is a marvelous combination of things, and it's phenomenal. And just before we started this program, you saw my wife coming down and commenting about the excellence of our merchandise, and of course, a woman has an eye for such things, and my wife most certainly does. So this is great stuff, and certainly you must buy and look as great in it as I do, and as confident in it as I feel. And of course, how else to feel confident than by drinking from mugs like this, these marvelous mugs, which can take, what was it, 15 ounces of tea. This particular tea that I'm drinking from this time is it's the mountain-picked oolong tea, Iron Goddess of Mercy tea. It's one of the best teas in China, but you can drink any kind of tea from this. It's a magnificent, wonderful porcelain mug with the double-headed eagle that you have in the Kremlin. And we both have it because we saw Putin drinking it, and we said to ourselves, Putin drinking from a mug with this crest, and we said that we have to have it also. So here we are. But we've also got lots of other mugs. We've also got lots of other shirts. My wife is buying some. So, and she's a woman. So come along, buy all sorts of wonderful things, and help yourself and help the Duran.
All right. Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Till next time, everybody. Take care.